Good evening and welcome to the Anshe Synagogue. We are so very honored to host this Yom HaShoah when we feature the Violins of Hope. And we are very grateful to our men's club and its leadership for helping to create this program. We are grateful for our partnership with the Jewish Community Centers of Chicago in being able to bring this very powerful evening to our community. I want to thank Cantor Liz Berkey for all of her work in putting this program together. I want to thank Lexi Newman and Linda Nussbaum and Barry Ballack for all of their work in creating this program tonight. A special thank you to our musicians, to Linda Velkis Nussbaum playing the violin, to Daniel Golden playing the viola, to Emily Mantell playing the cello, and to Lisa Christina for playing the piano. We thank each of them for being with us tonight. Zachor otanu. Remember us. These were the last words of so many who died in the Shoah. Remember us. Don't forget us. And that question has been hanging in the air since the day that Auschwitz and the other camps were liberated, now 78 years ago. But how? How to remember something as grotesque, something as impossibly large? How to remember this? How can you possibly encapsulate a time when the gates of hell were found on earth in places like Birkenau, Sobibor, Treblinka, Majdanek, and so many other places? Who can serve as witnesses to the greatest crime against humanity since the creation of the world? We have tried through historians like Lucy Davidowitz and Yehuda Bauer and so many others. But throughout it all, the most powerful voices, the most powerful witnesses are the survivors. People who told their own family stories. People who reduced the enormity of this event to a family, to a shtetl, to a journey on a train, witnessing the loss of a brother or a mother, a sister, a father, or a child. People who could tell stories of monstrous evil and also tell stories of wondrous kindness. people who could inspire us with their will to go on, with the ability to rebuild their lives, to create new families when they had lost their first family, to go to new countries, to build the state of Israel. Their stories inspire us. Zachor otanu. Remember us. The survivors have served as the most important witnesses to the Shoah. And Elie Wiesel, most of all, the most powerful voice, challenging the world to remember those who are often forgotten. Now, in the world in which we live, the survivors are leaving us. Time is taking its toll. So who will be our witnesses as we go forward? Who will offer a voice to what took place during those horrible years? I believe that the violins that we will hear tonight will serve as part of that function. Violins that have been saved from the Shoah. Some were thrown from trains on their way to Auschwitz. Some with stars of David engraved upon them. They were once the possession of klezmer musicians who once played those instruments at weddings, at simchas. Some of these violins were made for children who did not live long enough to play them. Others were played in concert halls in Israel when members of the Israeli Philharmonic, Jews who survived the Shoah, refused to play them, these instruments that had been created in Germany, and gave them away. Some say that the violin is the closest instrument to the human voice. And so I ask you tonight to listen for those voices coming from these instruments tonight. The music that we will hear contains the voices of a culture now lost. The voices of people who were murdered, 6 million, 1.5 million children. These violins will be here long after we are gone. And wherever they are played, they will serve as witnesses. Zachor otanu. Remember us. And so they do. The Kutzker Rebbe, one of the great Hasidic masters, once taught that there are 3 ways to mourn for a person. You can mourn in tears. You can mourn in silence. And you can mourn in song. Tonight, we will fulfill the Kutzker's teaching. We will mourn in the music, in the shirah, in the song. With these witnesses that have been restored by a father and his son, may their music fulfill the desire of those who did not survive and help us remember them. Those who cried, Zachor otan, remember us. Tonight, we remember a verse from Scripture as we begin this service of memory, followed by a concert. Ner Adonai nishmat adam. The soul of a person is like the candle of God. Just as we do in the home of Shiva, we light a candle to remember those who have been taken from us, and we remember the light that emanated from their soul that continues on through us. Tonight, we light 6 Shiva candles. 1 candle for each million that was taken from us. When 1/3 of the Jewish people were murdered. I'm going to call Chazan Alberto Mizrahi, Barry Ballack, Abe Trieger, Janet Siegel, Stanley Dreyfus, and Debbie Lewis forward to light the candles. Each of them have lost family members in the Shoah. Each of them grew up hearing of their memory.
Please rise. As we commemorate those who we've lost, say the El Malei Rachamim, the prayer that we offer at times of agony, where we ask God to take the souls of those who've gone before us and to provide them in death the rest that they lacked in life. We remember them.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bameromim, Dayan Almanot Ve'avi Yetomim, Hamatzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanefei Ashchina B'ma'alot kedoshim utehorim kezohar harakia Eteni shemot privevot alfei anoshim noshim v'taf shenehergu v'shenishchatu shenisrafu shenechneku ושנקברו חיים ביד המרצחים הרשעים ומוגי לב יימח שמם. בעבור שכולנו מתפללים לאלוהינו נשמותיהם בגן עדן, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם. תסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. ארץ אל תכסי דמם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותם, ונאמר
Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, whose radiance is like the heavens, to the souls of all the men, women, and children of the house of Israel who were slaughtered, strangled, and burned in the Shoah. May they rest in paradise. Master of mercy, may they find eternal shelter beneath your sheltering wings, and may their souls be bound up in the bond of life. God is their portion. May they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
You're invited to remain standing as we recite the Mourner's Kaddish. On a night like tonight, we often focus on those who died in the camps. But Jews died everywhere. Some in their beds, some outside their homes, some in their synagogues. There was no place that was safe. But tonight, knowing that Yom HaShoah is connected to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, let us also reflect on the fact that this past Passover, the first night of Passover this year, was the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. So let us also think of those who fought, knowing that it was a suicide mission, but they fought nonetheless. If you'd like to join me in the Siddur, you'll find a red Siddur near your seats. Mourner's Kaddish is on page 58. Page 58. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayi kol beit Yisrael, ba'gala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yeh shmei Rabbah mevorach ve'olamu me'omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'it hadar, v'it talev, v'it talau, shmei dekudesha barichu, la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, da'miram mi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom v'romah, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May God, who makes peace in the high places, make peace for us, the entire household of the people of Israel, and all humankind, and may all those that we remember tonight rest b'shalom, rest in peace, and may we always remember them. Friends, you may be seated. It's my honor to call upon Barry Ballack, a member of our congregation, to continue our program.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good evening, Chaverim, or if my father was here tonight, he would say Chaverim. When Cantor Liz Berkey first approached me to see if Men's Club would be interested in having the Violins of Hope at Anshe Emet for our Yom HaShoah program this year, I did some research and learned about the meaningful mission of the organization. There was no question in my mind that this would be the moving, inspirational, and masterful event that we all will be seeing tonight. Our Men's Club board agreed with me, and we are delighted to be partnering with JCC Chicago and Anshe Emet. On behalf of our Anshe Emet Men's Club, thank you to all our clergy, musicians, and Shirenu for making this such a sacred and glorious event. Sometimes the Jewish people are referred to by others as the people of the book. We refer to ourselves, as Rabbi Siegel mentioned, as the people of memory. We are commanded repeatedly, Zachor, remember. The root, Zachar, to remember, appears in the Torah more than 150 times. And both the Jewish people and God are asked to remember. Perhaps nothing is so essentially Jewish as remembering and retelling our story, as we just did last week when we sat with our families during our Passover Seders. We say the Yizkor prayer of remembrance when we ask God to remember the souls of our departed relatives and friends. Since 2016, our Anshe Emet Men's Club has taken on the special task of remembrance on Yom HaShoah with the reverence that it deserves. As a child of survivors, I take this mission very personally. As you know, music always has been an integral component in the lives of the Jewish people. It is noted that instruments even played an important role in the service of the priests in the ancient temple. The Jewish love for music even continued in the ghettos and the concentration camps of the Holocaust. Tonight, in partnership with JCC Chicago, we have allowed the musicians and their instruments of the death camps to live and be remembered once again as we bring the beautiful light of their music to you once again. We applaud all of you for making this happen tonight. For those of you who are familiar with our International Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs, you probably already are familiar or have received in the mail one of our yellow candles. Each year, our Anshe Emet Men's Club and FJMC provide these special yellow yurtzeit candles made in Israel to people all over the world to honor and remember the 6 million lives that were extinguished by bringing their light back into the world. The candle is yellow to remember the yellow star that Jews were forced to wear during the Shoah to readily identify them as targets of persecution. If you did not already receive a yellow candle, we have many here tonight. We encourage you to take one home and light it to remember. There is an optional donation if you are so inclined. Our international goal is to light at least 6 million candles on Yom HaShoah. While we are an ancient people, the Shoah only ended 78 years ago, not ancient history. The concept of yellow candles had its beginnings in Congregation Beth Tzedek in Toronto, when as recently as 1967, the congregation began to literally and secretly ransom Jews one at a time when they were trapped and persecuted in Syria. In 1973, their men's club joined with the men's club of Temple Ner Tamid in Peabody, Massachusetts, and designed the yellow candles to sustain a funding source to literally buy back Jews held in many hostile Arab countries at the time. Today, and virtually every day, I read about acts of anti-Semitism in our own country and around the world. Now, our Anshe Emet Men's Club and other men's clubs around the world use the donations from Yellow Candles to assist in funding our future Yom HaShoah commemorations. In so doing, we never forget those we lost in the past, and in so doing, we hope to prevent such a tragedy in the future. I thank our partner, the JCC of Chicago, for helping us to remember tonight. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. everybody. My name is Alexandra Newman, and I am a volunteer with JCC as a docent for the Violins of Hope project. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's really an honor to be here, and the remarks that we've already heard were just so powerful and moving. I just want to say thank you for all of this. The Violins of Hope project, as you've heard a little bit about, is a very important project in which two violin makers in Israel have been restoring over 70 violins that were recovered from musicians, Jewish musicians, before and during the Holocaust as a way to preserve the memory of the musicians and their families, and as Rabbi Siegel was saying, to use the violin as a voice and as a way to remember. There's a very wonderful book that I'm holding here about the project, and I definitely encourage everyone who's interested to learn more. The book by James Grimes goes through the stories of quite a number of the violins in detail, so you can learn a lot more about the instruments that are part of the project. As I was researching Violins of Hope, I was reminded of a passage from Night by Elie Wiesel, which Rabbi Siegel also referenced. I hope you won't mind if I read this passage, because I think it's a very moving way to connect with this history and understand the role of the violin to the Jewish people and in the history of the Holocaust as well. So in this passage of Night, Mr. Wiesel is recalling a time when he and his father were walking a very long distance in a cold night with a group of other people towards a camp called Gleimitz. And he's recalling a musician who he knew, a violinist by the name of Juliak. So I'll read the passage, and I think you'll find it also very powerful. "Father, are you there?" I asked as soon as I was able to utter a word. I knew that he could not be far from me. "Yes," a voice replied from far away, as if from another world. "I am trying to sleep." He was trying to sleep. Could one fall asleep here? Wasn't it dangerous to lower one's guard even for a moment, when death could strike at any time? Those were my thoughts when I heard the sound of a violin. A violin in a dark barrack where the dead were piled on top of the living. Who was this madman who played the violin here, at the edge of his own grave, or was it a hallucination? It had to be Juliak. He was playing a fragment of a Beethoven concerto. Never before had I heard such a beautiful sound in such silence. How had he succeeded in disengaging himself, to slip out from under my body without my feeling it? The darkness enveloped us. All I could hear was the violin, and it was as if Juliak's soul had become his bow. He was playing his life. His whole being was gliding over the strings. His unfulfilled hopes, his charred past, his extinguished future. He played that which he would never play again. I shall never forget Juliak. How could I forget this concert given before an audience of the dead and dying? Even today, when I hear that particular piece by Beethoven, my eyes close, and out of the darkness emerges the pale and melancholy face of my Polish comrade, bidding farewell to an audience of dying men. I don't know how long he played. I was overcome by sleep. When I awoke at daybreak, I saw Juliak facing me, hunched over, dead. Next to him lay his violin, trampled, an eerily poignant little corpse. Sorry. I'm sorry, it's hard to read it. It's a very powerful passage, and I think, I'm so sorry, I'm emotional reading it. The violins that you're going to hear tonight are, one of them could have been played by this person, and it's a very powerful symbol. So I will introduce Linda Nussbaum now to play the music for us. Thank you for having me here.
Good evening. What an honor and a privilege to experience music with these beautiful, beautiful survivors. So many pieces that we associate with being written during the Shoah actually come from Terezin, from Theresienstadt, including the pieces that we're going to play for you this evening. A large number of Jewish artists, writers, and composers were imprisoned in this show camp, where the camp leadership officially allowed prisoners to possess musical instruments, to have rehearsals, to create art. Made an extraordinary possibility of cultural exchange for prisoners, by prisoners. In Terezin, culture was valued. There were choirs, there were cabaret groups, classical popular orchestras, there was a coffee house. Music criticism was being written, chamber music, and there was even musical instruction. Performances of all sorts. And new music was created. Our selections tonight, both what we're going to play on our string instruments and the songs that we'll hear, they all just reflect so many different souls trying to understand and make sense of a world gone mad, of an intolerable, inhumane situation. Many of these works confronted camp reality through music or lyrics, as many of the imprisoned artists sought to retain their musical identity, to hold on to that, and continue their earlier lives. The musicians refused to accept their current reality and continued to create art. Music became a means to simultaneously promote survival and to express hope for a better world. Such moments of culture stood in sharp contrast to the daily struggles to survive. All of these cultural activities, these weren't necessarily for the benefit of the prisoners. They were exploited as propaganda. The SS camp leadership not only tolerated but welcomed culture at Terezin. Great art and creativity became a diversionary tactic by the Nazis when in the summer of 1944, a commission from the Red Cross was treated to a beautiful Potemkin village, a model transport camp in which there were performances of the Verdi Requiem and a children's opera. Having achieved a propaganda success, having diverted the Red Cross and the eyes of the world, over 18,000 people were soon deported from Terezin to the camps in the fall of 1944, including two of the composers you will hear from in a moment. Despite its culture, its cultural richness, we must always remember that Terezin the sign was still there. Arbeit macht frei was still there. And there was still a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of hunger, epidemic disease, overcrowding, dreadful hygienic conditions, as well as the threat of deportation constantly. The atmosphere was filled not only with music, but with anxiety and an uncertain fate. And you can hear it in this music. These violins, these instruments cry out for us to remember. We're going to play for you three pieces, two of which were written at Terezin. The first one by Hans Krasche is called Tanz, or Dance. And he actually wrote it in 1925, but the piece was performed at Terezin. It is for string trio. It goes through a lot of moods. There's an uneasiness about it, and yet in the middle of it, there's a lullaby, a moment of peace within the horror. The second piece is a duet originally for violin and viola by Sigismund Schul. And Dan graciously has transcribed it for two violins so that we could share the music of these beautiful instruments. And this piece has never been recorded. And it was actually recovered and published by Yad Vashem. And when we found it, I think you'll enjoy that very, very much. It really has some powerful messages. And then the third piece is by Gideon Klein. It is the first movement of his string trio, which was written at Theresienstadt, Terzen, and it also has a lot of Czech rhythms, it has a lot of drive, it has a lot of angst, it has a lot of tension, but maybe people dance to it. After we play these pieces, Dan will speak about a different type of music, that these instruments probably, well, most certainly, played some klezmer at some time. So, but first, Krasha, Schul, and Klein. Thank you.
It's a little musical, violin, chairs, whatever. Linda was gracious enough to let me play on this one for one song. This is the Wagner violin, which is really a gem. This is they're all beautifully restored, but this one is, it's from playing point of view, it's just magnificent instruments. We'll introduce you to the other two.
just want to take a moment. We've heard these beautiful instruments and we've gotten to know them through their sound. And I just want to invite Alexandra up again to tell us a little bit more about their history.
Hi again, everyone. Thank you so much. I was definitely overcome with emotion earlier. So we're hearing three beautiful violins today that have been restored by Amnon Weinstein and his son Avshalom. They are based in Tel Aviv, and they have a violin workshop there. And as we were mentioning earlier, they've restored over 70 instruments. So we're hearing three of them tonight, and maybe the musicians can sort of hold them up while I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. So the first violin that we'll discuss is actually the Benedict Wagner violin. That's Linda's.
That's the one I was just talking about.
Beautiful. So this violin, it was actually made by Benedict Wagner in 1774, and it was brought to Moshe Weinstein, who was the father of Amnon Weinstein, from one of the Palestine orchestra members who actually didn't want the instrument anymore because a lot of musicians that came from Europe who fled to then Palestine, when they had violins that were German instruments, they did not want to have those violins anymore because of the association, and this violinist actually threatened to sort of destroy the instrument or throw it away unless Moshe Weinstein would purchase the instrument because he just did not want it in his home anymore. A lot of violinists also did not perform. They were forbidden from performing music by German composers when they were in Europe, and then often decided not to continue playing music of German composers later on. So this Wagner violin is considered to be in excellent condition, and we're very happy to hear you play it tonight.
As well as almost any instrument I've ever seen.
Yeah. One of the interesting anecdotes that are that's discussed in this book is about how a lot of prominent Jewish violinists decided not to play, as I mentioned, not to play German instruments, so the market for Italian and French violins became more valuable. So you'll often hear about Stradivarius and Guarneri violins played by famous concert artists, and it's not that the German violins are of lesser quality, but many of the prominent Jewish violinists chose not to play on those instruments. So this is a very finely made violin. We have two other violins that are part of this program tonight. One of them is the Hecht violin.
That's this one.
This one, great. So the Hecht violin is also considered to be in very good condition. This violin belonged to a family of Alex and Fanny Hecht. They had two sons, Fritz and Ernst. They lived in Bielefeld, Germany. And when the Nazis took over in Germany, they left for Holland, and they found a home in Amsterdam. There, Fanny, a violinist, befriended a Christian neighbor, Helena Visser, who also played the violin, as did her daughter, Helena. In 1943, the Nazis rounded up most Jews living in Amsterdam and sent them to Westbrook and later to Auschwitz. Fanny Hecht was worried. She was afraid her family would be arrested, like so many Jews. One evening, she knocked on the door of Mrs. Visser and asked her to hold on to this violin in case the Hechts would be deported. One day, Fanny came upstairs and said, "Mrs. Visser, I want you to take care of my violin. I do not want the Germans to have it. And after the war, when we come back, you can give the violin back to me, and if not, the violin is yours." The sound of this violin is very beautiful, and inside the violin, it says Antonia Stradivarius Cremona, made 1743. We don't know if it's a true Stradivarius, but
there's a lot of instruments with the Strad
with that label.
But it's nice. This is a... It's a very nice instrument. It's not as powerful as that one, but it's still nice.
It's a beautiful sound and also played by a beautiful artist. So the violin is an antique instrument. The family soon was arrested and sent away, and the son Ernst, age 17, died July 9th, 1943. Fanny and Alex were also killed in Auschwitz on September 17th, 1943, and the eldest son, Fritz, died in a labor camp, Monowitz, January 18, 1945. No one survived. The violin was kept by the Dutch family for 74 years. They insisted on giving it back to Jewish musicians, and then when they heard about the Violins of Hope project, they traveled to Israel. They visited Yad Vashem, where they researched the history of the Hechts, and upon realizing there is no survivor, they gave it to Amnon and Avshalom Weinstein so the violin could be played and tell the story of the Hecht family. So thank you so much for playing on that instrument. It's beautiful.
We'll use it later.
And then the third violin that we'll hear is the AIPAC violin, which is also considered to be in very good condition. Would you like to play a couple phrases?
Sure.
It has a very warm sound. It's beautiful. So this violin belonged to Dr. Leon Schatzberg-Sawicki, who lived 1918 through 2008. He was born in Poland and died in New York. He graduated from the Lvov Conservatory in 1938 and studied medicine at Lvov University and graduated in 1941. He married a fellow student, Ella Schrenzel. During Nazi occupation, 1941 through 44, he changed his name to the Polish Sawicki, and with the help of false identity papers, he played this violin all over Poland in street corners, restaurants, and impromptu bands, while Ella tutored Polish children. They were liberated by the Soviets in July 1944, and both lived long lives and saw children and grandchildren. Thank you so much for bringing these violins to life, and look forward to hearing more.
this on? No, it's on. Okay, good. This tune is called sometimes Cry of Israel, I think, or Israel, 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 Israel. It comes from, it was definitely played in the Ukraine. I think it was played over much of the, the whole Eastern Europe, because I ran into a klezmer clarinetist at Klez Canada. It was part of his collection of tunes, and he was from Moldova and had just ended up a few years before in New York. So it was still being played to a certain extent for gatherings at that time. It's basically one of these, it's kind of a slow tempo in what they call sort of a horror. It's not like an Israeli horror. It's more or less in 3. You'll feel the rhythm of, but basically it was a tune which was used to welcome the bride, to bring the bride in, and probably for other uses as well. Sadly, made very perverse by the Nazis. There are eyewitness accounts from people in villages. There were agricultural villages in Ukraine, basically not quite collective farms, but they were, actual Jewish farmers in the Ukraine, and they were actually in some cases quite successful and had a very active community and religious life. And these are described in eyewitnesses' account, which you can read, and it must have been collected for Yad Vashem. But they refer to this tune specifically, and they refer to even to the clarinetist who was the clarinetist in the village, and there's several accounts of this particular clarinetist playing it. And the horrific part, which, it's almost more an extreme example of what we're talking about in terms of Theresienstadt, is that when Jews were being rounded up to be deported, they forced the clarinet player to play the same tune. So I like much more to think of it as its joyous use in weddings, but there's this subtext for all these things, which is sadness and bitterness. So I guess we have to take them both into account. But there's, Jewish music that's happy sounds to a lot of other people like it's sad. So I think we have to believe that the original tune is actually a very joyous tune, and let's keep the hope alive in it, as it were. We're going to play this one on the Hecht violin and the Słowicki violin, which we think are more like sort of street instruments, so we think it's especially appropriate for this kind of music.
There are many facets to music from this time, and now we're going to do a couple of vocal pieces, and I introduce Cantor Rachel Brooke with a song by Kurt Weill.
So many of us may recognize Kurt Weill's name and possibly many of his compositions, even if we don't know we know them. Most famously, possibly we've heard of Mac the Knife. He had a long and storied career here in the United States, and he was actually born in the year 1900 in Germany. And from early on, he was the son of a cantor and showed a lot of, in a religious home, clearly, and showed a lot of musical promise very, very early on. Went on to have a successful career in Germany until the world changed. Luckily, he was able to leave. He was very, very strongly disliked by the Nazis, as you can imagine, for being a proud Jewish man, as well as his political standings. He was very vocal about his leftist political leanings, and came over through Europe and then to the United States, where he partnered often with his love, Lottie Lenya, who was also a well-known performer at the time. So this piece is called My Ship, from the show Lady in the Dark, another collaboration of his, not with Bertolt Brecht, who was another frequent collaborator of his, but with Ira Gershwin.
My ship has sails that are made of silk. The decks are trimmed with gold, and of jam and spice there's a paradise in the hold. My ship's aglow with a million pearls, and rubies fill each bill. The sun sits high in the sapphire sky when my ship comes in. I can wait the years till it appears one fine day, one spring. But the pearls and such, they won't mean much if there's missing just one thing. I do not care if that day arrives. That dream need never be. If the ship I sing doesn't also bring my own true love to me. My ship has sails that are made of silk. Its decks are trimmed with gold, and of jam and spice there's a paradise in the hold. My ship's aglow with a million pearls, and rubies fill each bin. The sun sits high in the sapphire sky when my ship rolls in. I could wait the years till it appears one fine day, one spring. But the pearls and such, they won't mean much if there's missing just one thing. I do not care if those dreams arrive. That day may never be.
Gershon Kingsley also escaped Germany. It was a few days before Kristallnacht, and he fled to Palestine where he joined a kibbutz. He made his way to America, and he was a pioneer in electronic music. He wrote that song, Popcorn, that some of you may have known on the Moog synthesizer from the 70s. He had a prolific career on Broadway and in film, and he composed a number of collections of Jewish music until his passing in 2019. This song, Lullaby at Ponar, with music by Gershon Kingsley, is set to a text from a poem that originally was in Yiddish by Shmerke Kaczerginski. He was in Vilna, and in the Vilna ghetto. He hid Jewish cultural works to protect them until after the war. He escaped the ghetto and joined the partisans in the forest, and also fought with the Soviets. In 1950, he moved to Argentina and was busy with a writing and speaking career, and unfortunately perished in a plane crash in 1954. Lullaby at Ponar brings to mind the many mass killings that happened in this suburb of Vilna. Hush, my baby, weep in silence. You may rouse the foe. He has planted here beside us tombstones in a row. Daddy went away forever. Heaven knows how far. Every road is leading to the graveyard of Ponar. Hush, 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 my treasure, no more weeping. Cease your grief and woe. Daddy is forever sleeping, and we have far to go. Sweetly as the breeze caresses, joy will come when sorrow passes. No more tears will flow. Your eyes will show a happy glow, a happy
As we prepare for the last piece, a thought to share with you. There is music everywhere in the creation. Whales make music and crickets make music. Birds sing songs. Music is everywhere in nature. Human beings are the only animal that can compose music. It's endemic to our humanity. Tonight, through the mastery of these wonderful musicians, are three remarkable cantors. The humanity of the Jewish community has been heard. And these violins served as witness to the magnificence of the culture that was taken. So it is good that we could be together on Yom HaShoah and hear the music of their souls and mourn in song. Appropriately, we end this program with Ravel's Kaddish. you for being with us.